for joining. I was just giving the scoop that we're going to talk about my story. I'm going to give you some ideas around what emotional mindset mastery is, and then I'm going to take you through an experiential exercise around that. And then I'll invite you, if it resonates for you, into a 3-month program where you can really develop those skills and change your experience. So to give you background, I got married at the age of 24. I was a virgin when I got married, and that kind of started my experience of vaginismus, right? So my experience with it was night of the wedding, becoming intimate with my husband and having this excruciating pain, wanting to thrust him to the other side of the room, and just started really ugly crying, really emotionally triggered. And it was just a very off-putting experience. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. And I'm sure you can relate to that. You know, you're in the mood, things feel good, and then all of a sudden it feels like you hit a wall and there's nothing you can do about it in the moment. Your libido drops, right? You lose all interest. And it started to create anxiety for me the next time around, right? We were like, okay, well, this is new experience for you. Let's just keep trying, and maybe that'll shift things, right? You just keep trying. And that wasn't working. The pain was as evident as it was the first time, and the anxiety was heightened, right? Because we, you know, get into a moment and I start to think, okay, this is what happened last time. This was this experience I had last time. What if it doesn't work this time? And you start, you know, going into all the thoughts, right? About, for me, it was, I feel broken. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Like every other mammal on the planet can do this. Why can't I do this? What does my husband think about me in this experience, right? Is he going to lose interest? We were together for 5 years before we got married, and very intimate and very physical with each other in other ways. But how is this going to change our relationship? And, you know, all of the worst case scenarios. What if he cheats on me because he can't get what he needs from me? You know, anything and everything that could possibly be negative around the experience, I felt like I was experiencing. And I remember so many experiences where I would go, you know, we would have a moment, be trying, it wouldn't work out, and I would just go into the bathroom, sit on the floor in the corner and cry, because I just didn't know what to do. And so I share this with you because I want you to know that you're not alone, and that so many other women do experience this. And so many other women are not on the Facebook group, right? They're not talking to each other, because I figured I was the only one. I went to my OBGYN, and she hadn't experienced it herself. She didn't have a lot of women who came to her with this problem. She knew about a resource, physical therapist that was, you know, in the area, and she referred me, but she couldn't give me any support. And I've seen that so much from other women. And so I just want you to know you're not alone. And there's also, on the other side of this journey, there can be pleasure, not pain, great confidence, not shame, and you can really transform your experience. And so the tools that I'm going to walk you through tonight are really focused on, you know, mindset and emotions that go along with that. And I want you to know that, like, my entire experience, physically, emotionally, and mentally, was shifted because of the time that I invested into myself and the separation that I created between the thoughts that I was having and my response to those thoughts. And that's really what emotional mindset mastery is all about. So I am going to share my screen so that you guys can see. I'm visual and auditory, so I wanted to make sure that you guys would have the ability to see my screen and see some words that I'm going to share with you. And, you know, if you have any comments or questions, please share them in the chat, and we'll kind of walk through this together. So I really respect all of you for showing up today. You're very brave and courageous to do so. I know in my first stages, it was something that I really didn't want to talk about. I didn't know who else had experienced it, and it can be really hard to show up. And so I really honor you for showing up today. And I want to take you through this awesome experience. So mindset mastery, and I'm going to give lots of examples throughout so it's clear, is really becoming aware of the stories and the conditioning that we live out of and upgrading that operating system to one that's more present and true. So that's mindset mastery. And I'm going to give you an example going back to childhood of two little kids and the same event happening, but they have different perceptions of the event and therefore a different outcome of the event. So oftentimes we see little kids playing and they may trip over something, they may falter, and they may fall down. And in some situations, the kid is able to get right back up, right? Gives you a thumbs up, says they're okay, and they move on and they play. And in other situations, they may get shy, feel embarrassed, go in a corner for a little while and stop playing. Maybe they start to get emotional. And the reason it's the same event but two different circumstances is because unconsciously, from the time that we are born, our communities, the social media that we consume, our guardians, our families, our friends, anything that influences your five senses is creating your perception of the world and yourself. And so in the one circumstance where the child gets up and everything's okay, the first time they fell, their parents probably went over to them and said, hey, you're okay, you didn't get hurt, just keep playing, right? But in another situation, maybe someone who was around when that child fell down said, oh gosh, you're so klutzy, you fell over that thing, you should have seen it, right? So that's why they start to feel embarrassed. Or someone rushes over to them and starts getting really worried that they're really hurt when it was just this little fall. And so that starts to imprint on their perception and their conditioning. Just admit someone in here. And so that's just one example of how our stories and our conditioning can really shape our view on the world, right? So there's what is, and then there's our perception of what is based on our programming, conditioning, stories, and narratives. And I'll use those phrases to just mean programming, right? And so most of us are operating out of the conditioning that was built when we were very young. And until we take a step back and look into what is that conditioning, is it still true now? And if it is true, okay, we keep it. And if it's not true, we let it go and we replace it with something new. And emotional mastery is having the awareness that our thoughts create our feelings. And that's really critical because so often we think that our external circumstances are creating our feelings about something, when in reality, it's our thoughts that create our feelings, which is why, let's say someone's putting on a presentation. One person might be really excited and really confident about putting on that presentation, and someone else might be really nervous and scared. Well, the experience that they're having is the same. The event that's in front of them is the same, but their feelings are different because they're having different thoughts, right? Someone might think, oh, this is going to be really fun. I'm going to be able to add value. People are going to like the content that I'm providing. And someone else might be thinking, geez, I really hope I don't mess up or embarrass myself. So those thoughts are what's creating the feelings. And emotional mastery is when we can separate ourselves from our thoughts, do some inquiry, and take dominion over what thoughts we choose to believe so that we can take back control of how we feel. And we're going to go through an exercise tonight where you'll see that shift. So with this work, right, emotional mindset mastery, we really break free from any limiting beliefs that were unconsciously placed on us or that we placed on ourselves. And we update the outdated programming so that we can consciously create our reality and our future based on what's more present and true in this moment and live out our fullest potential. So like I said, mastery is really creating that space. So what are those things that we can do to create space? And we'll talk about that between the stimulus and the response. And so this was big for me with respect to my vaginismus journey, because when you are in a moment where you're experiencing vaginismus symptoms, right, you're flooded with past experiences that created pain and future fear around what this means for you having this experience. And so when you can trim that down and there's no future and no past and you're just in the present moment, you can really have greater awareness for what is true for me in this moment, not being affected by my past experiences or future projection, which is really saying, when you project into the future, it's saying all of these things could happen. I have no idea what one of these things is going to happen, right? Some of these things may never, ever happen, but they still create the response in your body, physically, mentally, emotionally. Those feelings are still creating responses because you're thinking thoughts, and your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. It just knows what's in your mind. And so regardless of if it's imaginary future projection or reality, it's still going to react in the same way. Just like if you go to a horror movie, right? It's not your reality if you're sitting in the theater and there's no zombies attacking you. But if you see it on the screen, you can still get scared. You can still get anxious. You might scream out of fear. And so that's just an example of how your mind doesn't notice the difference between reality or imaginary. So the mind is the only thing that limits you. And something really important to know is that the mind is really innocent. It's just trying to keep us safe. But safety to the mind does not mean safety as it means to us, right? All it means is familiarity and what's known, because what's known is safe. So that's why a lot of individuals have a hard time getting out of abusive relationships, because safety doesn't mean leaving and finding a non-abusive relationship to the mind. It just means I know this is familiar to me, and so we're staying here in this space. And that's really critical, because when you do the deeper work and you identify the deeper desire of what that thought is trying to serve you, oftentimes it's protection and keeping you safe, but it's just an ineffective way of doing it. Because like I said, safety means familiarity and what's known, not what's actually better for you or what's best for you. So you can find that by doing the inquiry work. So our mind is a meaning-making machine. And I'm sure that you can relate this to other experiences outside of just vaginismus, right? Because we make things mean everything and anything that it could possibly mean. If we feed our minds a thought, it will find evidence to prove that that thought is true. And if we feed it the opposite, it will find evidence to prove that that thought is true. So our thoughts are just like plants. What we feed and water will grow. And so the thoughts we choose to feed, water, the thoughts we choose to breed, the thoughts we continuously think about is going to be what flourishes. So we want those thoughts to be thoughts that are of service to us, not of service to us, right? And because our mind doesn't know the difference between really, what is safe and what is not, it only knows known and unknown, past pain and future projected fear. Without doing inquiry and emotional and mindset mastery, we get stuck in these cycles of familiarity in areas that we don't want to be in, but we don't know how to get out of, because our mind keeps telling us that this is safe and this is effective, when in reality, it's really not. And so our mind perpetuates the experience of past pain and future fear. And I'll give you another example when I was using dilators or trainers, whatever you choose to call them, oftentimes in bed, right, I would start with the smallest trainer, right, very small, and that might be painful for me. And I would think in that moment that, oh my gosh, if this Q-tip is hurting me, right? If this small trainer is hurting me, how am I ever going to get to the point where I can have penetrative sex with my husband? And I would perpetuate the experience of the past pain that I experienced in moments with my husband or in moments with using trainers, and the future fear around what it meant for me to have that. So I wasn't in the present moment using the trainer. And I'll give this example as we go through the tool together, so that you can see how to shift it. So it's really not until we're able to determine, okay, what is and what's my perception, my interpretation of what is based on my programming, that we can really shift things. And so we can't change our thoughts, right? It's not about not having thoughts. They come and they go naturally, just like our breath, we breathe in and out, and it's fluid. So the expectation is not that you change them. It's really to separate from them and identify what's true. So here I've stated, it's when we believe them that it hurts us. So in that moment when I was believing all of the projections onto the future, it was hurting my current experience now, because what we focus on expands. And I'll talk about this in the next slide, but when we look for what's wrong, we will find everything that is wrong, and we won't find anything that's right. So before we move on, I want to emphasize that it's been scientifically proven that it takes one negative experience to outweigh 7 positive experiences, and it's called negativity bias. So if you have 7 positive experiences and 1 negative experience, you need 7 positive experiences to outweigh 1 negative experience. And that's powerful to know, because you really want to focus on those experiences that are going to be of service to you, and those thoughts that are going to be of service to you. So if you're continually thinking negative thoughts around your experience with vaginismus, your journey to transformation is going to take a much longer time, because you have to make up for all those negatives, that negative self-talk that's compounding and putting resistance and pressure on your situation. So it's just a powerful statistic, 7 to 1, that you want to be aware of. And so negativity isn't bad, right? None of our thoughts are bad. It's just not effective for the change that we want to create. If you want to create change, and everything I talk about tonight is applicable in all areas of your life, not just with respect to your vaginismus journey. So it's critical to understand there's no negative, right? It's just, is it effective or is it ineffective? And right now, right, what I was experiencing, what you guys are going through, if you're putting resistance and you're putting pressure, and you're unconsciously have negative self-talk around your experience, it's not bad. Like I've discussed, the mind is programmed to find and fix problems, right? Our mind is programmed and designed to keep us safe by finding and fixing problems and looking for what's wrong so we can come up with solutions. But it's ineffective in coming up with solutions unless we do the work, because it's just perpetuating a habit of looking at what's wrong. So to give you an example of this, I'd encourage you to just look around your room and count anything that is blue. Anything that you have in your room, see what's blue and count the number of items that are blue in your room. And I'm going to do it with you. Okay. There's a lot of blue in my room. So now I want you to tell me how many items in your room were purple, right? You weren't looking for purple, you were looking for blue, so you didn't count the purple. Well, in this scenario, blue is the negative self-talk, right? The doubt that you have around being able to overcome vaginismus, or the challenges, the past pain, the future fear. And the purple is the potential pleasure on the other side of your journey. And so when we are looking for what's wrong, we're perpetuating and strengthening that habit, and we're getting further and further away from being able to achieve what we really want. And that's in all areas of your life. So this is really exciting because this is not just applicable to vaginismus. And because I'm so passionate about helping and supporting you to overcome it, this will change your journey. But once you learn the tools, you can apply it to all areas of your life, your professional life, your home life, right? If you're a parent, you can apply it to parenting, you can apply it to your relationships with anyone. So just something important to know. So with awareness and intention over time, we can reprogram our set point. We can create effective ways to make progress towards our goals, towards our desires, towards what we really want to achieve. And so when we do this, we move from resisting to allowing. We move from being in a victim mentality that this happened to me to feeling really empowered to move on with our journey, because we're able to take control of it. Each one of you is the control center. You are the hub to your transformation. And emotional and mindset mastery is a way for you to unlock the wisdom inside of you. And so that brings us to the next bullet, which is, instead of resourcing outside yourself externally for all the right answers and all the right steps to get where you need to go, you can in-source within yourself when you have the tools to give yourself what you need and create the transformation that you want. Instead of identifying and indulging in thoughts, right? So identifying with the thoughts, I'm not good enough because I can't do this, or something must be wrong with me. Instead of identifying and indulging in those thoughts and spiraling downward, like I tended to do, when you indulge and identify with thoughts, you step away from them, you observe them, you create that space so that you can say, okay, is this thought true in this moment or is it not? And we're going to practice that very shortly. And like I said before, you shift from happened to me to happened for me, right? This experience for me was really the catalyst that changed all areas of my life. I am in better physical condition because I learned I had to move more. I learned I need to exercise my hips and my legs. So I'm in better physical shape, and I've continued that even after overcoming vaginismus because it felt good. Emotionally, I'm in the best state of my life. I have the most confidence that I've had. You know, when I experienced vaginismus, my confidence it went away. And because of emotional and mindset mastery, I've really been able to lift it back up and have more and more confidence. I don't feel the shame around it. I'm glad that I had this experience because it has made my relationship with my husband stronger, emotionally and physically. It's made me a stronger individual. It's given me the tools to apply to other areas of my life. And it was really the catalyst for my change. So how awesome and fun is it to shift from happen to me to happen for me? And then really shifting from judgment of ourselves and having that inner critic that's punishing us for being in the state that we are, for being in the circumstance or event that we're in, to really shifting to understanding and compassion for yourself. So it's really a journey to fall in love with you and love your body, love your love your inner wisdom, love the core of who you are so that you can shift your experience. And understanding and compassion is so important, right? Because when we resist something, so you see there I have allow versus resist. And this is somewhat of the core of emotional and mindset mastery. So this is a wall of resistance, right? And this is my fist. And when I resist it, I feel pain here. There's no movement. It's just pedal, right? Foot on the brake and foot on the gas. Lots of pressure and there's no movement, right? So you stay stuck where you are. But when there's acceptance, acceptance embraces, right? If you see my hand, it's embracing my other hand. Acceptance embraces, acceptance holds and supports and lets it move through. And when you have allowance, you can really move through an experience as opposed to resisting it. And I find so often when there's an experience we really would rather not be having, there's a lot of resistance. But when we can lessen that resistance, you can move through it so much faster. So just to give you another example of how our minds can be deceiving, I want you all to raise your hand as high as you can. Beautiful. Okay, so that's raising as high as you can. Now raise it higher. Right, so all of us were able to raise our hands higher the second time, even though I said raise your hand as high as you can. And that's just an experiment to show you that our minds limit us. Unconsciously, our minds limit us. And so what emotional mindset mastery work really does is it calls you forward to what you're truly capable of so that you raise your hand fully from the get-go. And so what holds us back are obstacles, our challenges from achieving what we want. I call them blocks. And they're bad in those blocks. And there's a lesson to be learned. Like I mentioned before with my vaginismus experience, it was really the catalyst to not just having a greater intimate relationship, but it really changed and started shaping how I took on all areas of my life. And it really shifted my relationship with my husband. And because of it, honestly, I think that I have a better intimate relationship now than I would have without having had that experience. Because of mindset work that I did, and I talk about this in the program, because of visualization, I was able to have orgasm, and I'm able to have it 90% of the time that we're intimate, which I would say is very high for even women who don't experience vaginismus. So honestly, I think I am so grateful for this experience. And if it was intended for me to have this experience and to learn these tools so that I could share it with you, then it was worth my journey. I really believe that. So like I've said before, the mind is so innocent. It wants what's best for you, but it's not effective. And so it wants to keep us in familiarity and what's known because known is safe. And this unknown, even though it's ultimately better for you, our minds don't know how to get there. So that's why we need to shift the pattern. That's why we need to take action to do something different than what we're doing now so we can experience something different than what we're experiencing now. And what we're experiencing now, the thoughts that come in and out, whether we identify them as negative or not, are just patterns. They're not who we really are. And every time we choose something different, we weaken the outdated and the stale program. So when we change our relationships with the blocks change. So you're probably wondering, and we're getting to the juicy part where you're going to practice, how do I change my relationship with the blocks? Well, there's a couple ways that we've talked about. So you use inquiry, right? Separating and inquiring, is this true in this moment? You are going to ask powerful questions. And I have so many tools that I can share with you, and we're going to walk through 2 today to ask powerful questions. And then you really have to have self-compassion, understanding, and acceptance for the situation, the circumstance, and yourself, right? It's really all about compassion, understanding for you, and acceptance for you. And really practicing creating that space between the blocks and the challenges in you, right? The stimulus and the response. So now you're going to get to try. And we do this mindset work because it helps clear the fears and it enhances what works. So we can learn from our experiences and feel empowered moving forward, knowing that what the mind makes it mean is not always true and always effective for getting what we want. So you have the power. The thoughts move in and out. They're not fact or fiction until you classify them as such, and they don't define you or your experience. So what I'd encourage you to do right now is I'm going to stop sharing so that you can see me and I can see you. And I want to take you through an exercise so that you can experience it. So I'd encourage you, if you have pen and paper with you, or if you want to type in the chat, you can share in the chat, but just somewhere where you can record what comes up for you. Before we do that, so if you have pen and paper next to you, if you don't, go grab it. When you're ready, I invite you to close your eyes and just know that this is a safe space and that we're not going to have any judgment here. You're going to be held and supported through this exercise. And whatever comes up is something that you're just going to be observing. There's not going to be judgment, right? It's as if the thoughts are cars on the road, right, on a highway, and they're going past in both directions, but you are an observer on the side of the highway. And as these cars go past you in both different directions, they're neither pulling you in one direction or pushing you in another. Our thoughts are just like those cars, and we're just going to be observing them. And whatever comes up for you, just know that you're safe and that there's no judgment in this space. And we're just letting them pass. We're not going to engage with them. And I just want you to take a few deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And when you're ready, I want you to go to a time where you were experiencing symptoms of vaginismus. And I want you to presence what was coming up for you. What were the thoughts that were coming up for you when you were having that experience? And we're going to work with those thoughts that are most dominant for you, that are most charged, that have the most energy behind them around your experience. What do you say to yourself in those moments? How do you see yourself in those moments? And take as much time as you need. And I'd love for you to, type in the chat so you're not alone in this when you're comfortable, if you're comfortable, and I'll express to you what I felt. So in moments, right, I already mentioned I feel broken. That was a thought that came up. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? I questioned my husband's attraction to me and feelings for me in those moments. I questioned my capability. So just write down what's most dominant for you. You can write it in the chat or write it on a piece of paper. We're going to be working with a thought, a specific thought. And once you have that thought, I am going to copy paste the questions into the chat so you have them there. We're going to start asking some questions around that thought. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is it true? And for this, this is the work of Byron Katie, by the way. It's called The Work. And this is just a piece of it. There's a larger tool, but she created this tool to question our thoughts, to do inquiry and create that separation. So the first question is it true? And you really just want to have a yes or no. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's your truth. So if it's a yes, that's okay. And if it's a no, that's okay. So is that thought true? So my thought is, I'm broken. Is it true? And then the next question you're going to ask yourself after you have your yes or no is, can I absolutely know it's true in that moment? So without a shadow of a doubt, if I was to put a loved one's life on the line by saying it is true or it's not, yes or no, could I be absolutely certain 100% that it is truth? All right, and once you have that, it's all right, whatever you write, yes or no, that's your truth. The next two are, you know, the kickers. So how do I react? What do I do? What happens when I believe that thought? So just noticing in that moment when you had that thought, what do you believe? So I'll go back to my example of using the trainer, right? In that moment, if I said, yes, it's true, I can know without a shadow of a doubt that something's wrong with me, I'm broken, whatever my thoughts were. How do I react in that moment? Well, I get more anxious in that moment. I tighten up, right? Your body constricts when you're stressed or when you're anxious. So I'm creating some more constriction where I'm using a trainer, and I start to experience more pain. I start to think about things that are going to happen in the future, right? Well, if I can't use a Q-tip or the small dilator, how am I going to be able to use a larger one, or my husband's penis, right? And you start to question and think about all those things. So that just creates heightened anxiety. So this is just good to notice, right? So when I'm in this state, when I have these thoughts and I believe these thoughts, this is how I feel. And so Rakshana said she believes it to be true and that she's hopeless and lost. She gets tightened up and clenched up. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I really invite you to think about this next question, which can create so much relief and release. And it will take practice to get there, right? So who would you be without the thought? Rakshana, who would you be without the thought that I'm hopeless and lost? I get tightened up and clenched up, and there's just, this is impossible, right? And so really think, if there was no past pain that your thoughts were going back to, and there was no future projections that were being generated by your thoughts, and you were just in this present moment during that situation, how would you react? Who would you be without the thought? So in the situation that I gave to you, I would just be a woman in her bed using a trainer, right? I would be experiencing some sensations in my body, but I wouldn't be associating them as either negative or positive. They would just be neutral. And I would be thinking that, okay, if there was no past pain associated with it, and this was just something that everybody did in order to have penetrative sex, I would just be thinking, you know what, I'm making really good strides here. I'm on this dilator and, you know, I'm feeling some sensations in my body, but yeah, I'm just like making progress towards this goal, right? And someday as I work little and little and little and little, I'm going to get to a larger dilator. And yeah, this is exciting. And because I wouldn't be having anxiety and stress influenced by the past pain and the future fear, I wouldn't be creating that constriction. So I wouldn't be affecting even more so the pain that I'm experiencing by adding that pressure, that stress, that anxiety onto it. So really, these questions can help you reframe the situation. So if you don't have any past pain and you don't have any future fear, what are you in just this moment? In just this moment. I would wonder if this happens to other people or if it was just me. So again, that's another thought, right? So if you keep dissecting it and you ask that question here, right? Is it true? Can I be sure that it's true? We can go with if other people are experiencing it, right? Is it true? Can I be sure that it's true that other people aren't experiencing it? No, I can't be sure that it's not true, that other people aren't experiencing it. How do I react when I think that? Well, there's probably some other thoughts that come up if you feel like you are the only one experiencing it. And then what would you be without that thought? If you didn't worry about anybody else and you were just in the moment experiencing that. And it's interesting because we associate pain with pain, right? The sensations of pain with pain, because we've been taught this is what is painful. But what if on some other planet, and I did this work on myself and it did really change things for me. What if somewhere else that pain was orgasm, that pain, that sensation was good? So I'm just going to be super vulnerable with you and tell you guys that there are times when there is pressure, right? But how can you shift your thinking to say, now I'm not talking about excruciating pain here, but pressure, maybe some stinging, but how can you associate that with, oh, that's not that bad, right? It's okay, I can breathe into it. And it starts, just like we talked about before, resistance versus allowance. When we're not resisting it, it starts to relax. So when we're not resisting a contraction, it starts to relax. And so how can you reframe and shift? So every time you see a thought pop in, you ask these 4 questions. What are you with the thought and what are you without the thought? Without any thoughts, I'm just a woman staying on my bed using a trainer. And if you really sit with it and there's no thoughts about past or future, it really lessens the load, right? And so let me just read through some of these chats here. Same here. I feel like I'm the only one who feels this. I feel weird. I ask questions how other people can have pain-free sex, but I can't. I feel lost. Well, look at who's on here. Now, not everyone showed up, right? We were supposed to have 20 women here tonight, and there were 55 women who signed up for this. There's 1,400 women, 1,400 women in the Facebook group alone. So just having that awareness that you are not alone. I shared my story with you, right? You know I've experienced this. So I hope that gives you some comfort. You are not alone, and there are resources and options out there for you to transform the experience. And there are a lot of people who aren't speaking, right? So there's 1,400 people in the group. That is not the equivalent of the number of women who have vaginismus, pain with sex, or no orgasm during sex. There are women who can have pain-free sex, but not pleasurable sex. So we don't talk about it a lot because it's a very intimate thing. And it's not talked about a lot. And I think social media and movies, TV shows, they glorify it as this amazing thing that every woman is, the sexual prowess of actors, actresses, celebrities. And in movies, we don't see people experiencing this necessarily, right? So that's exactly what I'm referring to in our programming, right? So that's one of the things that influences why we feel the way we do about our circumstance, because of the external sources that are feeding our unconscious programming. I would feel bad. Ooh, I would feel bad that I led my boyfriend on to then stop because it hurts so much. So this is definitely something that I think a lot of us experience, and I've experienced it myself, right? Feeling some kind of guilt around the fact that we weren't able to make it all the way through, and maybe we didn't satisfy our partner. And in this process, really working on yourself and focusing on yourself and recognizing our partner's roles in how to overcome this if we have a partner is really a big part of it, and it plays into it. And so thinking about that, Alyssa, right, that feeling bad, you can go back to those questions. How do you act, right? Do you how do you act in that situation, and what would you be without that thought? How would you maybe treat yourself or him differently and have more compassion for what you're going through? Let me see. I always wonder why this happens to me now, because I never used to have problems before. Yeah, so everyone's situation is different and everyone's circumstance is different. And I definitely think that it's something that you can get to the core of in asking powerful questions and doing the inquiry work around past experiences. Why am I having this now? What is the deeper desire and how this is trying to serve me? Because our minds and our bodies don't do things that they don't think are of service to us, right? Because they're trying to keep us safe. So I didn't even know there was such thing as vaginismus. I feel regretful. I wish I knew about this before. I got my life sort out. Oh, I could have had a baby by now. This is triggering my infertility issues. Understandable. So I think it's so important that we recognize what's coming up and then create that separation, right? That separation is really important, because when you have all these feelings and emotions, right now I can see in the chat, we're really identifying with what that means for us, right? What that means for our past, what it means for where we could have been or what should have been. And when we can trim it down and really just be in the present moment and focus on that, we can transform our experience, and it can be really powerful. So something that is helpful after doing this exercise is doing some self-compassion, compassionate self-forgiveness. And this is something that was created by the University of Santa Monica. And what you do is you say, I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that, and I'll give you an example around, everything I've taken you through, that the truth is, so I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that I'm broken, right? The truth is that I'm whole and complete regardless of my capability, because I'm inherently complete as I am today. And there are so many functions that my body does without effort. I see with my eyes without effort. I smell with my nose without effort. I breathe in and out without effort. I hear with my ears without effort. There's so many things that my body is capable of. And I'm not broken. So something along the lines of that, right? For me, this was the catalyst that changed my experience, that changed my life. And so I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that this was impossible, right? The truth is, I know women who have overcome it. At least one. There's other women in the program who are having, there's other women in the Facebook group who are having success stories, right? The truth is, it's not impossible. I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that I'm alone. The truth is, I'm not alone. Look at the women who are here. Look at the women and the individuals who are in the Facebook group who are looking for support. I'm not alone in this experience. So recognizing that after you've done the inquiry work starts to reprogram your mind.